Let's talk then, Paul, because another interesting note that came out of the of Arne Slot's press conference today was his conversation about Alexander Isak. Alexander Isak's back on the grass, albeit he said in running shoes, not football shoes yet. He's doing a bit of work, and when pushed upon it, I think Arne Slot revealed that the plan, if all goes to plan, is to get Alexander Isak back in group training or in training towards the end of March, beginning of April. We don't know what Liverpool season is going to be left by then, of course. They could be out of everything, and it could be just a procession towards an end of a petered out season. They could be in semi-finals, they could be in finals, they could be desperately clawing to get themselves Champions League qualification as well. But welcome news, again, if not Alexander Isak going to play a major part in the season, there are potentially going to be some massive games there where having the most expensive player in British football history on your bench for 10-15 minutes might end up being a positive. So really good news that, again, so far so good in terms of the rehab. When he went off injured against Spurs, I think a lot of people were fearing that might be him for the season. I know Graham Potter spoke about Sweden potentially hoping to have him back as well if they then get qualifying for the summer. So good news all round. And yeah, Liverpool could get a huge boost even if they get Isak for 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah, it reminiscent a little bit of remember when Cisse came back towards the end of 2005 and played a couple of major roles in final. It could be a similar situation here with Alex.
Yeah, I was going to reference that myself, so I'm glad you brought that up. You think of there are a lot of similarities to that, really. Cisse came in 2004, club record signing, breaks his leg in the October, was it, I think, against Blackburn, and then by the time he comes back, Liverpool are trying to win the Champions League and they're trying to qualify for the Champions League via the Premier League, and he was just a bit of an impact sub, wasn't he? And particularly the way Benitez set up in Europe, his pace was able to stretch games when Liverpool were hanging on and trying to save a result. But I'd be reluctant to put too much pressure on Alexander Isak when he does return, if it is sort of mid-March, April time, because anything he can contribute is just a welcome bonus at this stage, because you want to be doing all you can to get him fit and ready for a good, uninterrupted pre-season, provided Sweden aren't at the World Cup. And then basically give him what he wasn't able to have last summer because of the acrimonious fallout from his transfer to Liverpool. So, having him fully up to speed across an uninterrupted pre-season programme means that he should be able to hit the ground running next season. And I think that is when you will see the Alexander Isak who Liverpool broke the bank for in, the start of September. But for now, I don't want to say you just sort of write him off, but I think you can't be expecting him to come back and immediately become this player who Liverpool thought they were getting overnight. It's unfair on him, and it places unnecessary strain on the team because he's not going to be able to produce what you paid the money for straight away. So if he can get the odd goal here or there, or, he can come off the bench and, have some sort of impact, brilliant. But I think the main thing for him at the moment is just to get as fit as he can, and then, make sure you head into that summer ready to sort of produce what it will be expected of you for the rest of your Liverpool career, really. Yeah,
it's interesting because, like I say, he's a long-term signing, and there's plenty more to come. But like I say, we don't know yet where the season's going to be. But going back to Cisse, for example, it's hard not to do the comparison. He comes back, like I say, his first game back to Champions League quarter-final, and he plays in both quarter-final. Second leg quarter-final, he comes off the bench in both semi-finals, he comes off the bench in a final. He scores the goals against Aston Villa on the last day of the season to give everyone a little bit of boost, although in the end it wasn't enough to get Liverpool top 4. Yeah, they just went and won it instead. I do think, though, there could be value, because what we've noticed at this moment, we go back to the fitness question before, Paul, is at this moment in time, Hugo Ekitike is finding it a little bit tough. Yeah. In terms of 90 minutes, game after game. And if Liverpool are going to be in, like we hope they're going to be in, last 8s and last 4s, potentially of Champions Leagues, and, a quarter-final, semi-final of an FA Cup, that's too much game time for Ekitike to play. Yeah. And, Chiesa is the second backup striker at the moment in time. I'm not quite sure that's the level or in terms of what you want. So, you're right to suggest, like, obviously, the best of Alexander Isak's to come further down the line, but it wouldn't half help if you've got him coming on for 15 minutes from April onwards, because it'll do Hugo a bit of a boost, but also he's a lad who's got a genuine goal in him as well. So, I'm guessing, like you said, no one's putting pressure on him, but a bit behind the scenes, there's a lot of people thinking we could really do with Isak being somewhere available, even if he can give us 15 minutes a week, or a game, then that could be a huge benefit for Liverpool. Yeah, it's been noticeable how tired
Ekitike gets as the game wears on, and it's not even necessarily physical tiredness. It's mental, and some decisions have been the wrong one, or maybe a pass is under hit or over hit, just because that tiredness creeps in. And speaking to people recently about Ekitike at Liverpool, and that's the one thing they're looking to build on now. They think he's a brilliantly talented footballer who's had an unbelievable first year at Liverpool, but the challenge is now to sustain that level of form across 9 months of a season, across 90 minutes of games. And it has been noticeable how the levels have dipped sort of 75 minutes onwards, because he's just not used to playing 3 games a week at the intensity of the Premier League. Absolutely no concern whatsoever with it, but it's just a natural development of a player who is still only 23 and not used to the league. So having someone of Isak's ilk to come in for the last 15, 20 minutes of certain games will be a huge boost, just to keep the legs fresh of Ekitike and make sure that he doesn't, I think there was a real concern after the Sunderland game that if he went to the well once again, he could pull up with a muscle injury, and that really would have left Liverpool, struggling, wouldn't it, with only Chiesa really to choose from going forward. So, or Gakpo, I guess. But yeah, it's having Isak back will be obviously great to have him back, but it'll also have a knock-on effect, positive knock-on effect for Ekitike as well, and that can only be welcomed, because I have been personally concerned that Ekitike is maybe being run into the ground a little bit too much. I'm fearful of they had the hamstring scare, didn't they, at the beginning of the year, which meant that he missed Arsenal and Fulham, and the last thing you want is for him to pull up and be on the shelf for 3 or 4 weeks, because that really will put pay to any hopes of winning more games.
No, mate, absolutely. It's interesting because we've always kind of hinted, don't you agree, but like the Bundesliga is the closest to the Premier League, we think, in terms of like physicality and the nature of the game, but Ekitike, Wirtz and Frimpong have all had that progression into the Premier League, or that step up. Yeah. And again, they're all young fellas, but all 3 of them have suffered in different ways with that. Frimpong was never injured. He's had a few muscle injuries. Now, Florian Wirtz himself admitted like he needed to bulk up. They put him on this bulking up plan just to get him physically stronger. Ekitike just looks goosed after 70 minutes every game. Like he runs and runs and runs, and he looks like he's blowing a little bit, which is understandable. But the step up is so intense, and like I say, that's why, going back to the Isak conversation, when you sign someone and you have to pay big money because they're used to the Premier League. He did his bed in period at Newcastle. He got used to the Premier League at Newcastle. That's why it has been such a big blow, because these lads do need time to adapt. And Isak should have been the banker, really. And unfortunately, because of, again, a missed pre-season and then a big injury, he hasn't been able to be that banker. So we maybe put a little bit too much on Ekitike or a little bit too much on Wirtz, where actually that was meant to be Alexander Isak's job, really.
It was, yeah. It was described to me, Ekitike was the option where they could afford time and space for him to develop and grow into the player that they think he can become, because Isak was the surefire option, as it was described to me. And I think that was fair, ultimately. You look back in the summer and that made a lot of sense. But for loads of reasons, really, Isak hasn't been able to get motoring, has he? We know he came in having not had a pre-season for obvious reasons, training on his own, training at Sociedad, all that sort of stuff. And then I think by the time he plays for Liverpool in the Premier League, I think it was probably about 5 months in between those Premier League appearances. His last one for Newcastle and his first one for Liverpool. So it's a long old stint in between games of Premier League intensity, having not had any warm-up games either. So there was an acceptance that it would take him some time to get up to speed, and he joins as an international break kicks off as well. So there's a couple of weeks where he's not in Liverpool's care. They're obviously in touch with the Swedish medical team, at length, but it's not the same as it is seeing him every day working on and seeing what sort of condition he's in. So it just feels like it's been one thing after another. But Isak, he gets injured at Frankfurt, the little groin injury. He's probably had 1 or 2 niggles as well that I've forgotten about since. And then he gets the bad one at Tottenham. So yeah, it's been a season to forget for Isak, but I'm still convinced after this season that, he gets fully tuned in, up to speed, and he will be Liverpool's top scorer for the next 3 or 4 years. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah, he's brilliant. I'm looking forward to him scoring the winner in Budapest. I can't wait. Or scores in the shootout like Cisse did all those years. Yeah. I can't wait for that one to happen. You can write that one down in pen. That's definitely going to happen. That was a clip from Journo Insight. To check out the whole show, simply download the Redmen Plus app or click the link in the description.